my retirement day, my son muttered. He's done, just a burden now. Laughter filled the room, leaving me humiliated. I thought my career would end in silence and shame. Then the chairman handed me an envelope that changed everything. Left them all shaking. Tell me where you're reading this from. Your city, your street, your kitchen chair, or the back seat of a crowded bus. Because I want to picture you standing with me under those gold hotel lights, feeling the air turn thin the way it does before a storm. 40 years of work had led to that night. A ballroom dressed in white linen, heavy curtains, and the polite clink of cutlery that tries to sound like respect. I had a small speech folded in my pocket. Only 2 minutes of thanks. Nothing grand, nothing sentimental. Just names and gratitude, and a joke at my own expense. Then my son leaned toward his wife and muttered, soft enough to pretend it was private, loud enough to be heard by anyone who wanted to hear, "He's done now. Just a burden." Laughter moved across the tables like a spill of cheap wine. Some laughs were sharp, some were shy, some waited to see if mine would join them. It didn't. I watched the ripples find the edges of the room and break there. My mouth tasted of metal, the way it does when you've bitten your tongue. I set my hand on my water glass to stop it from trembling, and I told myself I would not give him the spectacle he was fishing for. The lights were too warm, the air too sweet with perfume. And in that fake warmth and sweetness, his sentence felt like ice. I stood there a heartbeat longer than the room expected, and in that pause I tried to remember the first line of the speech I had practiced all afternoon. I could hear only the scrape of chairs, the tiny squeak of a waiter's shoe, the soft scrape of a knife gathering butter, and somewhere near the back, a phone camera clicking off as if even a lens was ashamed of what it had caught. I lifted my eyes to my son. Ethan had that relaxed smile people wear when they believe the verdict is in their favor and the judge is a friend. His suit was too tight around the shoulders, and it made him look both bigger than he was and smaller than he wanted to be. Mia, his wife, sat beside him, the tip of her finger resting like a claim on his wrist. She had the calm face of someone who thinks she is standing on a ship that cannot sink. I leaned toward the microphone and felt my breath settle. When I spoke, my voice was flat in a controlled way, not dull, not weak. It cut the room like a line drawn with a ruler. "Thank you for being here," I said. "You have been my second family," that was all. I left space around the words so they could breathe. I saw the accountants ease back in their chairs. I saw the marketing team angle their phones back up. I saw Ethan's smile, the slow curl of a man who thinks the old lion has only gums left. While I spoke those safe words, another scene unrolled behind my eyes, an old film flickering back to life. Our kitchen, when the tiles were still bright and the paint still smelled new. Steam on the window, a pot of soup simmering. My wife, Anna, in her faded shawl with the tiny blue flowers, standing with one hip against the counter the way she always did when she was about to say something kind that would also correct me. Ethan at 6 with his hair sticking up like a dandelion and a paper crown cut from a cereal box. "Dad, will you come to my game on Saturday?" he asked, hopeful in the simple way children are hopeful. Like hope is the default setting of the heart. "I have a meeting, champ," I said, and I told myself it was the truth and not an excuse. "I'll make the second half." He nodded, and his nod forgave me too easily. Anna's eyes met mine over the candles. No anger, just a little weather warning, the sort the sea gives you if you listen. I told myself there would be 1,000 Saturdays. The lie was tender. Tender lies are the ones that grow teeth. Other memories came with it, all in a rush, as memory does when the present bruises you. Ethan on my shoulders at the park, his hands gripping my forehead like he was steering me home. Anna stitching a button on my shirt one-handed, the other hand reading a recipe for a soup she never measured. The smell of wet socks on a winter afternoon when the heater rattled and the cat pretended not to like us. I packed those moments into my chest like a traveler shoving clothes into a bag that will not close. I needed them there, not to soften me, but to remind me who I had been before the work turned me into a man who measured his son's childhood in quarters and deadline extensions. The hard truth sat down beside me at the head table and crossed its legs like it belonged there. I had taught my boy to watch my back for weakness, not to watch my face for love. And in teaching him that, I had made my own opponent. None of this was new. Betrayal rarely arrives as a surprise. It's usually a slow drip you decide to ignore because fixing the pipe means tearing up the kitchen. Over the past year, Ethan's jokes had been the kind that leave a bruise 2 days later. "We should get you a smart watch that calls an ambulance when you nap," he said once in front of Mia's parents, and they laughed lightly, like polite people over a recipe they don't want seconds of. At dinner, he accidentally sent me the wrong time more than once so that I would arrive when the plates were already clean and the chairs already pushed back. On my birthday, they sent a gift card to a chain cafe I never went to, unsigned, with a note that said, "Keep it simple." It was not cruel enough to protest. That's the trick of small meanness. It drafts your dignity into silence. One afternoon, I came home to find a realtor in the living room speaking to Ethan in a tone that said decisions had already been made. "We're just getting quotes," Ethan told me, "because maintenance is a lot and your knees don't love the stairs." He spoke as if he had studied kindness and learned its grammar but forgotten its music. "It's still my house," I said, and he gave me that smile that tries to be patient while waiting for reality to catch up with it. I did not shout at him then. I did not shout at him now. I have learned that anger is a loan with brutal interest, and the collector always knows your address. So I put both hands on the edge of the table and thought of 3 things. The weight of my wife's hand when she squeezed mine the last winter. The taste of peppermint she always left on my cheek. And the quiet deal I had made with myself after she was gone. I promised that I would not let grief turn me into a man who begged to be loved. I promised I would not mistake surrender for peace. I promised that if the day came, when my son looked at me and saw only cost, I would not weep in front of him like a man you could move with a discount. I would remain calm. I would use words that were straight and clean. I would prepare for storms while the sky was still blue. And so for years I had smiled when people suggested I slow down, and I slowed my steps, but not my mind. I kept my office audits up to date. I read every clause in every policy, like a prayer you say not to the sky but to the engine of a ship you plan to steer safely into harbor. I built systems. I planted seeds where no wind could blow them away. Behind my old office there is a storage room with a narrow door that sticks in the damp. In the darkest corner sits a safe, not tall, not grand, just a plain box with a good lock and a better memory. In that safe are papers that look boring until you read them slowly. They use small words that mean large things: voting rights, continuity, discretionary, in perpetuity. Those papers were born in the quiet after Anna's funeral, when being busy felt like breathing. I rewrote my will with a lawyer who didn't smile when he said, "Ironclad, because men who sell you certainty with a grin never sell you certainty at all." I created a trust that could tell the difference between a son who takes care of his father and a son who takes care of himself. I shifted shares into vehicles that cannot be driven by a man in a hurry. Most important, I sat down with the chairman 2 years ago in a little cafe that smelled of burnt sugar and talked not about the past, but about what the company would need when I wasn't in the building every morning at 7. He is a quiet man who looks like he owns only sweaters and plain watches, but he has eyes that do not lose count. "You worry about legacy," he said. "I worry about stability. We can help each other." We found a shape of agreement that would let me step away without letting the work I love be used as a stick to hit me with. We put it on paper, and those papers were folded again, and placed in an envelope with my name written by someone with careful penmanship, and the envelope was placed where it would be handed to me when a room like this needed to learn the price of its laughter. I carried on with my small speech. The warehouse crew who taught me that getting the order on the truck was sometimes more of a miracle than getting the order in the door. The interns who arrived afraid and left with their shoulders back. The engineers who argued with me and saved me from myself more than once because equations do not respect ego. People laughed in the right places and clapped in the parts where people always clap. The noise turned warm, and for a second I almost believed the night could be like the ones you read about on company blogs. Soft and clean and false. Then the chairman stood. He has a way of rising that makes the chair seem grateful to be left in peace. He picked up an envelope from the podium and walked toward me through a small forest of nodding heads, his steps slow enough to be respectful, quick enough to be sure. Even the caterers paused. The music the hotel piped in fell away like a polite guest, slipping out of a room they don't belong in. Ethan changed position. It was a small movement, The kind a man makes when he believes he is about to clap for the end of something. He laced his fingers behind his head, elbows wide, grinning toward his friends at the next table like a host announcing the dessert. Mia angled her phone and framed me and the chairman in a single picture, the outgoing and the incoming, the retired man and his replacement, the neat story posts like to tell. When the chairman reached me, he put his hand on my shoulder, a human weight that grounded the moment. 40 years, he said, and more than numbers can measure. He held out the envelope. It was cream with a blue edge that caught the light. My name was written in ink dark enough to be read from a row back, but the writing had a softness to it, as if the pen had been dipped twice to make sure it did not scratch. I took it from him and felt the thickness, the kind of weight that tells you a decision has been made, not promised. I did not hurry. Suspense is a rude trick in the hands of a showman, but it is a proper instrument in the hands of a man who knows he has been made a spectacle and chooses to retake the stage with grace. My thumb slid under the flap. Paper whispered. Somewhere in the back, a chair leg tapped the floor 3 times, quick and nervous. I unfolded the document once, then again. The words faced me. For a breath, I kept them my own. Then I lifted my eyes to the room and read in a level voice that carried easily without shouting. Effective immediately, I said. Richard Cole is appointed honorary chairman and retains executive voting rights on strategic matters in perpetuity, as defined herein. The board acknowledges his continuing role as steward of legacy initiatives and grants him final review authority over capital allocations above the stated threshold. The company recognizes his ongoing mentorship as an operational necessity, not an optional courtesy. I could feel the sentence move through the air like a slow wave. I could feel the silence lean forward to listen better. I did not read the legal numbers. I did not need to. Those belonged to me, to the safe, to the trust, to time itself. I kept reading the parts that mattered to the room. In recognition of service and foresight, the board further affirms that any material changes to the corporate structure or control require the assent of Mr. Cole. I paused there, not for effect, but because effect bloomed on its own. The way thunder does after lightning has already tested the world. I let the last line hang a second. The board thanks him for a legacy that continues. I folded the paper once, then placed it back in its envelope and set the envelope on the table in front of me. Where the condensation from my water glass had left a pale ring, the circle looked like a moon had been here and left a mark. I rested my fingertips on the edge of the envelope, a small touch to say, this is not a prop. This is a key. Years ago, Anna and I walked by the lake at the edge of town. Pine trees kept the wind in a soft cage. She said to me, not quite teasing, you build things that outlast moods. I think that was her way of saying, protect what matters from people who confuse new with better. That sentence rose in me now like breath. The room did not move. Even the chandelier's hum seemed to step back. The first sound came from the very end of the left row. A spoon set down carefully on a saucer by someone whose hand had found new respect for china. I looked at the chairman. He gave a tiny nod, a baker's measure, perfect and contained. I turned back to the microphone. If you have ever stood on a cliff and watched a wave build far below, you know there is a second when the sea is still deciding what it will become. It was that second now. I could feel the shape of the next moment pressing against me like a crowd against a glass door. My heart was steady. My hands were steady. I let my face be calm, even kind. I have learned there is a power in speaking, as if you are walking through your own living room, touching the backs of chairs you bought, moving the cat off the armrest, humming a tune that has lived in your house longer than any guest. I lifted the microphone a fraction closer, the way one leans toward a friend in a busy cafe to be sure they hear the important part. Some of you didn't know this was coming, I said. That's all right. I prefer to move quietly. I kept my eyes on people I had hired when they were afraid, and on people who had saved me from mistakes I almost made. I kept my eyes away from anyone who had laughed too hard a moment ago. The point of a knife is not to wave it. The point of a knife is to cut one clean line. When I leave this room tonight, I went on, I will not be leaving the work. I will be leaving the habit of pretending. I must ask for permission to care about what I built. The sentence felt like setting a Picture back straight on the wall where it had hung crooked for years. I could feel the urge to perform, to draw the line brighter with words that would travel quickly through texts and videos. It is a young urge, and I am not young. I let it pass. Instead, I said, "Thank you," again, the plainest tool I own. And this time the word did not bend its knees. It stood. The envelope waited under my hand like a boat under a rope ready to be untied. At the table near the door, someone cleared their throat. A cough answered. A waiter took one step and then remembered he did not want to be the first to move. From the corner of my eye, I could see Ethan's profile. It is my father's profile, sharp at the nose, stubborn at the chin. I remembered my father placing a wrench in my hand and saying, "Hold it like you mean it." The wrench was heavy, and it taught me about balance. This envelope was heavy in a different way, but the lesson was the same. When something is weighty, you do not wave it. You let it rest where its weight can be seen. The chairman took half a step back and left me where I belonged, at the center of what I had made. Not because I demanded center stage, but because some centers are earned by showing up day after day with a lunch in a brown bag and a pen that runs out and gets replaced. I let the quiet lengthen, not to embarrass anyone, not to punish, but to give the room time to understand that what had seemed like a goodbye was only the end of a particular shift. In the glass of water at my elbow, I saw my reflection, thinner than the man who started at this company, and stronger in a way that does not show in mirrors. I thought of Anna again, of the way she had tapped her knuckle on the table when a point had been made, and then smiled like a secret had been kept properly. I tapped the table once with my fingertip, a private gesture between two people. One living in a picture frame and one under a chandelier. It was a small thing then to slide the envelope a little closer to the microphone so the first row could read my name on it and know this was not a ceremonial keepsake. It was a small thing to look toward the board members, men and women who know the shape of capital and the history of the storms we survived. They nodded, not like puppets, but like people who had sat through the same early mornings I had and had learned the same math. That profit without principle is a trick, and tricks are for short roads, not long ones. None of this was performance. It was simple and exact. The world outside the ballroom would dress it up later. People always prefer their stories either crueler or kinder than the truth. Tonight I wanted only the truth. A father standing where he had stood for decades. A son somewhere in that light, thinking the old story was over. An envelope that said the old story had pages left. A room waiting to learn how to read it. I could hear the lake of the past inside me. The way the pines had whispered when we walked along its edge one autumn, and Anna had told me, "When the time comes, speak slowly and do not shake." There is a dignity in slowness when you have earned the right to it. I placed my palm flat on the envelope and pressed, a quiet seal. The paper under my skin felt cool. I drew one breath in and let one breath out. Then I raised my head and looked out into the faces that had gone still. And I kept my voice calm and even as a metronome, the voice of a man not surprised by his own backbone finally standing up straight. The first face I looked for was his. Ethan had gone very still, the way a runner freezes before the starting gun when he realizes he's on the wrong track. His smile had not simply faded. It had fallen off his face like a mask that no longer fit. Mia lowered her phone an inch, then a little more, until the screen pointed at the tablecloth instead of me. At the corner table, one of Ethan's friends tried on a laugh and then decided against it. The room had the hush of a church after a bell rings. I could feel the shape of my next sentence waiting. I did not hurry. I let my eyes take in the familiar things, the chipped edge of the podium, the scuff on the parquet floor where deliveries had always knocked the same corner, the napkin folded with the hotel's tidy pride. These small details kept me steady. I am not a grand man. I am a man who notices where the pressure lives in a room and moves it with careful fingers. I let my hand rest on the envelope like a pianist finding middle C. I turned toward my son as if we were alone in our old kitchen and not under a chandelier. "Burden," I said softly, as if I were testing a word in a language I had not spoken in years. "You used that word a moment ago." He tried to rearrange his mouth into something like a grin and ended up with nothing at all. I shook my head once, not to scold him, not to shame him, just to mark a boundary like a fence you can step over but shouldn't. "I'm not angry, Ethan," I said. "Not the way you think. Anger burns fast. I prefer heat that lasts. I let the words sit there. People lean in when you leave room for them. You have work you want approved. Pitches you plan to make. Doors you think will open because you've learned to walk quickly toward them. I glanced down at the envelope. Those doors still open. But they do not open for disrespect, he swallowed. It was a small movement and it shook his whole face. Dad, he began, and I lifted a hand just enough to smooth the air. Not today, Ethan, I said, my voice flat and even. You'd be in the way. It was not a line I savored. It was a line I placed, the way a mason sets a stone and makes sure it will hold the wall. I turned to the chairman. We'll schedule a board session next week, I said. Legacy initiatives first. We'll include the mentorship academy we discussed. Then I faced the room. Some of you know my late wife Anna never wanted her name on anything. She said names are for mailboxes and the inside of old sweaters. But I've kept her out of the story long enough. Tonight we established the Anna Co. Fellowship. It will fund training for staff who didn't go to the right schools or grow up knowing the right people. It will be paid from the Legacy Fund and it will be permanent. The first class starts this quarter. My voice did not rise. It did not need to. I watched heads turn, watched eyes suddenly shiny with that quiet relief people feel when the story tilts toward fairness. I could hear Anna's light knock on the table in my head, her way of saying, yes, that. I did not look at Ethan again yet. I let him sit with the sound of his mother's name attaching itself to something unbreakable while I moved one step deeper into the shape of the night. There are also personal matters, I continued, and now I allowed myself to face him. The house. His shoulders lifted half an inch. Mia's gaze snapped up like a shade pulled too quickly. It isn't for sale, I said almost gently. It hasn't been for a long time. It belongs to a trust set up the winter after your mother passed. I am the trustee. The trust could pass to you one day, but it cannot be used against me while I live. Not to relocate me, not to simplify, not to tidy your schedule. I didn't say the word nursing home. I didn't have to. It sat between us, understood. There's a small cottage by the lake too, I added, because defeat flourishes in the dark and I refuse to let it feed. I've been fixing it on weekends. Fresh paint, new lock. Good light in the mornings. I will spend some time there. I'll come into the office for board matters and for the fellowship. I will not need your permission to do either. He stared at me in a way I recognized from his childhood, the face he made when a puzzle suddenly showed its picture, and it wasn't the one he had wanted. You planned this, he said, barely above a whisper, as if planning were a crime. I prepared, I said. There's a difference. He tried to laugh then, and the sound broke apart before it left his mouth. You could have told me, he said, and there it was. The small boy inside the man, peeking through the suit that fit too tight across the shoulders. I tried in other languages, I answered. The languages of example, of showing up, of asking to be spoken to, not spoken about. I did not list his jabs or his absences. My memory contained them, but tonight memory was not a ledger. It was a map, and maps show where you should go, not just where you went. I thanked the chairman aloud for the envelope and the board for its trust. The applause began, hesitant at first and then clearer, like a group remembering a song. I didn't make the applause mine. I let it belong to the good work we could still do together. When it faded, I stayed at the microphone because there was a knot left to untie, and I preferred to do it where the light was kind and everyone could see the rope loosen. I looked at Ethan. He was not a villain. He was a man who had learned the wrong lesson from the right things. I know you've been organizing a project, I said lightly, as if the word were a napkin I could fold and set aside. A bold one, a fast one. It requires capital above the threshold. His chin tilted. Hope we'll try any door, even the ones you've locked. Submit it in writing, I said. We'll review it in sequence. I'll ask hard questions, not because I want you to fail, because I want the work to survive your success or your failure. He flinched, barely. If you want to lead, I added, you must learn how to walk while someone older than you asks if your shoes are tied. There was something else I needed to place, a point small enough to be missed by anyone not listening closely. Large enough to hold the weight of a house if you said it right. There's also an allowance you've been receiving through a family account, I said, not unkindly. It was meant as a bridge, not a bed. It ends this quarter. The fellowship needs that money more than you do. Your salary is healthy. The bridge has reached the other side. I could feel the air change again, a tighter ripple this time, sharper, not cruel. It was the sound of a room realizing it had underestimated both the problem and its solution. I did not explain further. You do not explain gravity. You let it hold the world in place. Mia started to say something, and then pressed her lips together. She is not unwise. She was raised to believe neat futures are owed to neat people, and life has been too kind to teach her differently yet. I did not speak to her directly. This was between a father and his son, and dragging other names into it would have made the scene messy when it needed to be clean. I thought of Anna again, her shawl, her soft voice. Once when Ethan was 13 and had just discovered how to be unkind for sport, he told her I was old-fashioned and slow and not smart enough to understand the new world. She had handed him a bowl of soup and said, "Your father understands the world. He just refuses to let the world make him smaller to fit it." He had rolled his eyes. She had smiled as if his future were a wild animal she meant to coax toward gentleness. Standing under the chandelier now, I felt that animal close enough to see its breath. I stepped away from the microphone so the evening could move again. People needed a rhythm to follow. They needed to know that the story had not turned into a courtroom drama, but into something simpler. A man reclaiming the dignity he should not have had to defend. I shook hands with colleagues who had kept my secrets and saved my pride and carried heavy boxes without complaining. I hugged the woman from logistics, who always remembered to send Anna flowers from the whole team, even after the year when everyone forgot how grief rearranges calendars. I let the chairman steer the crowd toward dessert and coffee. While they moved, Ethan stood, and for a second it looked as if he would walk out. Instead, he came toward me with the careful steps of a man walking on ice. He stopped 2 feet away. The distance men leave when they need to protect what's left of their shape. "You embarrassed me," he said. The words were small and private, meant for me alone. "No," I said. "You embarrassed yourself. I gave you a way to stand up without losing more." He swallowed. "He is not a crier. Neither am I." "I thought you were done," he said, not finding a better word than the one he had spat into the room earlier. "I'm not a machine you switch off," I said. "I'm the man who taught you to tie your shoes and look people in the eye. You forgot the second part. That landed. I saw it. Sometimes correction is a hammer. Sometimes it's a hand on a shoulder that doesn't move away." He stared past me at the envelope on the table as if it might say something comforting if he learned to read better. "Is there any way?" he began and stopped. "The true question trembles. It does not know how to ask for itself. There are many ways," I said. "Most of them begin with, 'I'm sorry.' The best of them continue with, 'I'll do better, and here's how.' You can bring me a plan that helps people who can't help you back. You can bring me quiet respect instead of public jokes. You can bring me your time." He nodded. It was not a promise. It was the small tilt a man gives when he has realized the ground beneath him exists and is solid and is not his to name. He opened his mouth, closed it. "I'll send you the project proposal," he said finally, because men who cannot yet say the right thing sometimes reach for the useful thing. "Good," I said. "And you'll come by the house on Sunday, early. We'll make coffee." He looked surprised. He should not have been. The door to a father's kitchen is the last door that locks. We moved through the rest of the evening like people relearning an old dance. There were toasts that felt honest, and toasts that tried too hard and sat down quickly. There was music someone had chosen without thinking, and then decided was perfect after all. There was cake with frosting so sweet it made the lips sting. The young staff came to shake my hand, their eyes bright with that beautiful mixture of ambition and relief. I told them what I tell anyone who asks me for advice and means it. Keep your word. Ask for help early. Practice being calm. One of them said she had been planning to quit next week because no one noticed her work. I told her the fellowship would notice. I told her to apply and to write her application like she was writing to her future boss, herself. When the night thinned and the hotel began to reclaim its chairs, I picked up the envelope and slid it into my jacket. It did not feel like armor. It felt like a photograph you keep near your heart, proof that what you love can be protected without being hidden. I walked out under the kind of sky that forgets its own stars in the city glare. The air had the coolness of late evening and the quiet of a room after the last guest chooses to be kind and go home. The valet brought my car around. I thanked him by name because his name tag had told me his name, and that is what names are for. As I opened the door, I heard my name again behind me, spoken softly. Ethan. He stood with his hands in his pockets like a boy who has not yet learned where to put them when he is sorry. "Dad," he said. It was all he could manage. "Sunday," I reminded him. "7," he nodded. "I'll be there." He would. I believed him, not because belief is obligated, but because I had given him a narrow, honest road, and men find it easier to walk a hard road than to stand forever in a soft lie. I drove to the lake house. I wanted to see the way the moon slid on the water and to breathe the pine. I wanted to set the envelope on the small kitchen table and let it sit among ordinary things. Salt shaker, radio, the cup with the chipped rim that no one should use and that I use every morning. I unlocked the door. The place smelled like wood and lake and a little like the paint I hadn't quite finished near the back window. I clicked on the radio. Old songs arrived the way birds do, as if they live inside the wires and only visit us when we remember how to listen. I set the envelope down and poured water into the kettle. When it boiled, I made tea the way Anna taught me, letting the bag swim without squeezing it, because she said the bitter comes from impatience. I sat and let the heat move through the thin cup into my fingers. I looked at the empty chair across from me and did not fill it with a ghost. Grief had been my weather for years. Tonight it was my windbreak. It kept the cold off and let me breathe. What did I feel? Not triumph. That is a loud, short word, good for parades and bad for nights when you need to sleep. Not sadness. That had been with me too long to be new. I felt something like balance returning to a table leg after you slide a coin under it. A steadiness shaped by respect. My son had tried to measure me by my utility and found the scale broken. I had given him a better one and told him how to read it. If he learned, then we would both be richer. If he refused, then the house would be quiet, and the work would still be good, and the fellowship would carry forward the part of our name that deserved to outlast our arguments. I thought about the sentence I wanted the night to end on. Not the speech sentence or the legal sentence, but the sentence I would carry into sleep and leave on the table for the morning to find. It was simple. Families don't take what's yours and laugh while doing it. They honor sacrifice. They remember love. It's not poetry, but it is the kind of line you can build a life around. I rinsed the cup, dried it, set it upside down on the towel. I slid the envelope into the drawer with the spoons. I turned off the light. Outside the lake was dark, and the pines held the wind the way a mother holds a child who has finally stopped crying. I went to bed with the sound of water like breathing, and for the first time in a long time, I slept without rehearsing arguments in my head. I didn't need to. The story had turned quietly on a hinge built years ago, and the door was open towards something better than winning, being right in the old, plain way that doesn't need victory to stand. If you read this far, I'd love to know where you're reading from. If this story moved you, like it, share it with someone who needs a calm kind of courage. Drop a comment with your thoughts or your city, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.